They stood her on the platform, a young woman, trembling, clutching her baby so tightly that the child's cries echoed through the dusty air. Around her, men shouted prices as if she were no more than livestock. Laughter mixed with greed, and every voice cut deeper into her soul. She looked down at her baby, knowing she could not protect him. The crowd pressed forward, eager to claim what was never theirs. And then, silence. From the back, a Lakota warrior raised his hand. In that single gesture, history took a turn no one expected. Welcome back to the channel, Dostin. Today we're diving into a story that is as heartbreaking as it is inspiring. It's about a mother being auctioned like an object, her baby clutched in her arms, and a Lakota warrior who stepped forward in the unlikeliest of ways. This is not just a tale about one woman. It is about courage, compassion, and defiance in the face of injustice. The air was heavy with dust that afternoon, the kind that clings to your throat and settles in your lungs. The trading post, little more than rough-hewn timbers and creaking boards, smelled of sweat, stale whiskey, and something far darker: greed. A crowd had gathered. Ranchers with sunburnt faces, traders in worn coats, soldiers with sharp eyes, and drifters looking for a spectacle. They pushed in close, shoulder to shoulder, voices buzzing with anticipation. At the center of it all, on a makeshift platform of wooden planks, stood a young native woman. Her dark hair was tangled from the journey, her feet bare and cracked from walking. But it wasn't her exhaustion that gripped the onlookers. It was the way she clutched the small bundle in her arms, a baby, perhaps a year old, maybe less. His cries rose and fell like a haunting chant, piercing through the noise. Each whimper was a reminder that this was no livestock sale, no wagon trade. This was flesh and blood, a mother and her child. The auctioneer barked loudly, his voice cutting through the murmurs. He was a tall man, with a hat too big for his head, and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. He treated the woman as though she were nothing more than a horse to be inspected. "Strong arms, young, capable," he shouted, motioning at her thin frame. "And with her, a child, healthy, already proven she can bear life." He chuckled, as if this were some kind of joke. The crowd responded with laughter and jeers. Some men elbowed one another, smirking at the thought. Others leaned in, their eyes sharp, calculating. They weren't bidding for her as a person. They were bidding for labor, for possession, for control. The woman lowered her gaze. She couldn't meet their eyes. She hugged the baby tighter to her chest, as if her embrace could shield him from the cruel reality unfolding around them. Her lips trembled, though no sound escaped them. Every part of her posture screamed fear, but also a strange, fragile dignity. She would not beg. She would not collapse. She would endure, for her child if not for herself. Pause for a moment and imagine this scene. If you had been in that crowd, what would you have felt? Pity? Shame? Or would you have turned your eyes away, convincing yourself it was none of your business? The bidding began. $50, one man shouted, his voice thick with drink. 60, another countered. The numbers climbed, each one another chain tightening around the young woman's neck. For the bidders, this was a game, a competition to outdo one another. For her, each number was a step further from freedom. Her baby began to cry louder, the sound almost desperate. The auctioneer smirked and turned the moment into theater. "Hear that? A strong set of lungs. This boy will grow well, strong as an ox. You're not just buying a woman, you're buying her future." The crowd roared with approval. Some men shouted obscene comments. Others laughed cruelly, pointing as if the woman were not a human being but a strange animal on display. In that moment, she felt utterly alone. Her people were nowhere to be seen. No familiar faces in the sea of strangers. No one to step forward and say, "This is wrong." Her only tether to life was the child in her arms. She rocked him gently, whispering words only he could hear. Words in her native tongue. Words of comfort, of promise, of love. But what good were promises when the world was intent on breaking them? And now I'll ask you, if you were in her place, holding your child while men shouted numbers for your life, what would you pray for? A miracle? Death? Or just a chance, any chance, at freedom? The bids rose higher. 70, 80, 90. Each man sizing her up as though she were cattle. The auctioneer paced in front of her, puffing his chest, stoking the crowd. "Come now, gentlemen, don't be shy. She's young, she's strong, and she comes with her own proof of fertility. Who will give me 100? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some shook their heads, unwilling to pay so much. Others whispered, considering. The woman closed her eyes for a moment, holding her breath. The baby squirmed in her arms, sensing her tension, his tiny fists gripping her dress. The air felt like it was tightening, as though the whole scene might collapse under its own cruelty. And yet no one questioned it. No one asked why a mother should be sold like a mule. No one asked why a child's future should be auctioned away before it even began. That is the nature of injustice. It thrives not just because of those who commit it, but because of those who stand by and let it happen. Suddenly a voice rose above the rest. 100! A stocky man near the front waved his hand, his face red from drink. The crowd cheered as though this were sport. The auctioneer slapped the side of the podium. "There we go, 100! Do I hear 120? The woman's knees trembled, but she forced herself to stay upright. She had been told once that strength can be silent. Perhaps if she stood tall, if she showed no fear, her child would remember her not as broken, but as unyielding. And yet, she was breaking inside. Every cheer from the crowd chipped away at her hope. Every smirk reminded her she was no longer seen as human. But here's the suspense. What do you think happens next? Will the bidding end here, sealing her fate with the drunken man at the front? Or is something unexpected about to break the silence? The bidding was loud now, a wave of shouts that echoed off the wooden walls of the trading post. The auctioneer's voice rose above the chaos, barking numbers like a commander on a battlefield. Sweat trickled down his face as he fanned the crowd into frenzy. "Who'll give me 120? She's worth every cent. Look at her. Strong, young, with a child that proves her worth. 120, gentlemen, 120. The men leaned forward, voices overlapping, each one eager to claim the prize. Some were ranchers who saw her as free labor. Others were drifters whose eyes glimmered with darker intent. Their faces blurred into one, a sea of greed. The woman clutched her baby tighter, her eyes darting from one bidder to the next. Every new shout made her flinch. She could feel the weight of their stares pressing into her skin, stripping her of dignity. Her child whimpered, sensing her fear. She whispered to him softly in her own tongue, words of comfort he could not understand but could feel in the rhythm of her voice. But comfort meant nothing here. The hammer of the auctioneer was ready to fall, ready to declare her fate sealed by the highest bidder. Think for a moment. If you had been standing there, would you have spoken out? Or would you, like most in the crowd, have stayed silent, afraid to break the ritual of cruelty? The numbers climbed. 130. 150. A drunken man with a crooked hat staggered forward, waving his hand with a grin that sent chills through the woman's spine. The crowd cheered his boldness, mocking her misery as though this were entertainment. The auctioneer laughed, slamming his fist on the wooden rail. "That's the spirit! Do I hear 170? Who among you will be the proud owner today?" And then, silence. The bidding slowed, the jeers softened, and a strange unease rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. Something was shifting, though no one yet understood what. At the edge of the crowd, half in shadow, stood a figure unlike the others. Tall, broad-shouldered, his posture calm yet commanding. His skin bore the sun's bronze, his hair tied back, and his gaze, sharp, steady, unflinching, cut through the chaos. A Lakota warrior. He had been there all along, silent, watching. Some had noticed him earlier but dismissed him as another bystander. Now, as he stepped forward, the air itself seemed to grow heavier. The woman felt it too. Her heartbeat quickened. For the first time since the bidding began, she dared to lift her head. Her eyes met his, and in that brief moment she saw something she had not seen all day. Not hunger, not cruelty, not greed, but something else. The auctioneer blinked, thrown off by the sudden silence. "Well, do I hear 170? The warrior's voice rang out calm and steady. 200! The crowd erupted in shock. Some gasped, others muttered curses. A few laughed nervously, unsure if he was serious. $200 was a sum that silenced the bravest bidders. 200? The auctioneer repeated, his grin faltering. He studied the warrior, perhaps expecting hesitation, a trick, a drunken jest. But the Lakota's face remained calm, his hand raised firmly, eyes fixed on the platform. The woman's knees trembled. She did not understand. Was this salvation or another chain? And here's the question. If you were in her place, would hope spark in your chest? Or would fear whisper louder, telling you that nothing good comes from being claimed by another? The drunken man who had shouted 150 snarled, slamming his hat against his thigh. "This ain't right," he barked. "He's no traitor. What's he want with her?" Murmurs spread like fire through the crowd. Some spat curses, their prejudice plain. Savage. Out of place. He shouldn't even be here. Others stood silent, uneasy, as if the balance of the entire auction had been upended. The auctioneer cleared his throat, trying to regain control. 200? Do I hear 220? Anyone? 220? But no one spoke. The warrior's bid had crushed the room's bravado. No man dared to go higher. The auctioneer's hand trembled on the hammer. He glanced at the crowd, then back at the warrior. "Going once," his voice cracked. "Going twice." The woman held her breath, her arms tightening around her child. The silence stretched, a heavy pause that felt like eternity. "Sold," the auctioneer declared at last, the hammer slamming against the block. "Sold for 200. The crowd erupted again, but this time in whispers, in disbelief, in muttered resentment. Some shook their heads, spitting into the dirt. Others stared at the warrior with wary respect. The drunken man stormed away, his curses fading into the background. The woman stood frozen, her mind reeling. What did it mean? Who was this man who had raised his hand? The warrior stepped forward through the crowd, each step deliberate, unhurried. The people parted reluctantly, giving him space though they muttered under their breath. He mounted the platform, his shadow falling across the woman and her child. She recoiled instinctively, pulling her baby closer. But the warrior did not reach for her. He did not touch her arm or seize her as the others might have. Instead, he stood before her, meeting her eyes with steady calm. "You are safe now," he said quietly, his words simple, but his tone carrying a weight she could not mistake. The auctioneer thrust a paper toward him, the official record of the sale. The warrior didn't glance at it. He dropped a small pouch onto the podium, the sound of coins clinking against wood. Then, turning his back on the crowd, he motioned for the woman to follow. Every gaze in the room followed them, some with anger, some with confusion, a few with awe. No one dared to stop him. But here's where the suspense deepens. Was she truly safe in his hands? Or had her fate simply shifted from one form of captivity to another? As they stepped into the sunlight, the woman's heart pounded in her chest. She could not know what lay ahead. Freedom? Bondage? Or something entirely unexpected? One thing was certain. The moment the Lakota warrior raised his hand, history had changed. The sunlight outside the trading post was blinding. After the suffocating darkness of the auction hall, the wide-open sky felt unreal. Dust swirled under the boots of men dispersing, their mutters and curses still echoing behind. The woman tightened her grip on her baby, his tiny fingers clutching at her dress. Her heart pounded as she followed the Lakota warrior into the light. For a few moments the world seemed unbearably quiet. No auctioneer's voice, no laughter, no jeers. Only the sound of the warrior's steady footsteps and the faint cries of her child. She did not know whether to feel relief or fear. Was this man truly different from the others? Or had her chains merely changed hands? Imagine her fear. After being treated as property before dozens of eyes, would you trust the stranger who just bought you? They walked away from the trading post, leaving behind the cluster of buildings and the sneering crowd. Ahead lay the vast expanse of the prairie. Endless grass rolling beneath the wind, dotted with shadows of bison far in the distance. The horizon stretched so far it seemed like freedom itself, and yet she did not dare to believe it. The warrior carried no rope, no whip, no sign of cruelty. His stride was purposeful but not hurried. Every few minutes, he glanced back at her, not with the possessive glare she had expected, but with a calm that unsettled her in a different way. The woman adjusted her child, whispering lullabies in her tongue. The baby's cries softened into hiccups, his head resting against her shoulder. Still, her muscles remained tense. She had learned the hard way that peace often shattered too quickly. At last, the warrior spoke. His voice was low, steady. "You are not my slave," he said. The woman froze. Had she heard him correctly? "You and your child are free." The words felt impossible. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She wanted to believe him desperately. But how many times had promises been broken before? And here's the question. If you were in her place, would you believe those words instantly, or would you cling to suspicion until proof arrived? They walked until the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the plain. The warrior stopped near a stream, its water glittering in the fading light. He motioned for her to sit, and without another word he knelt to fill a leather pouch. He offered it to her first, then drank only after she had sipped. She studied him closely now. His movements were measured, respectful. He never reached for her child, though when the baby whimpered, he looked with genuine concern. At one point, when the infant fussed too much for her weary arms, the warrior extended his hand silently, as if offering help. She hesitated, clutching the child tighter. Then, slowly, reluctantly, she let him take the boy. The warrior cradled the baby gently, rocking him with surprising ease. The child settled almost immediately, staring up at the stranger with wide, curious eyes. The woman watched in disbelief. This was not the rough handling of a man who saw a burden. This was care, real, simple care. Night fell, and they made camp near the stream. The warrior built a small fire, keeping the flames low. He roasted dried meat, tearing pieces and placing them on a flat stone near her. He did not command her to eat. He simply left the food within reach. The woman's stomach ached with hunger, but still she hesitated. Trust was not built in a single night. The warrior noticed her caution but said nothing, continuing his quiet work. At last, she took a small bite, her eyes never leaving his. When the baby stirred, the warrior shifted closer, not to intrude, but to shield them from the chill wind. He wrapped his own blanket loosely around mother and child, then leaned back against a tree. For the first time in days, perhaps weeks, the woman felt warmth that was not laced with fear. She closed her eyes for just a moment, letting exhaustion take her. Midnight thoughts. But sleep did not come easily. Her mind raced. Who was this man? Why had he paid so much to free her? What did he expect in return? She remembered the cruel laughter of the crowd, the leering eyes, the hammers slamming on the auction block. Compared to that, this silence felt almost alien. Could kindness be real? Could freedom exist, even for someone like her? And I'll ask you, in that silent night, would you let yourself hope, or would you prepare for disappointment? The next morning at dawn, the prairie glowed golden. Birds sang, and the wind carried the scent of wild sage. The warrior was already awake, tending the fire. The woman stirred, her baby cooing softly against her chest. She expected a command, a direction. Instead, the warrior spoke again. "You may go where you choose," he said. "No one will follow. No one will harm you." Her breath caught. The words felt unreal, like a dream. She looked around at the endless grass, the open sky. She was free to go. But where? She had no home to return to, no people nearby to protect her. The warrior seemed to sense her doubt. "If you wish," he added, "you may walk with me, but the choice is yours." Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time in so long, she was being given a choice. On the trail, they continued their journey together, sometimes in silence, sometimes with brief words. The warrior never pried into her past, never asked her name until she offered it herself. When she finally whispered it, his nod was respectful, as though acknowledging her identity restored something the auction had tried to strip away. On the trail, he lifted her child when her arms grew tired, carried water for them, and always walked slightly ahead, not to lead, but to shield them from what might come. She began to notice small things. The way he scanned the horizon, always alert. The way he slowed his pace so she could keep up. The way he treated her presence not as a burden, but as natural. And slowly, piece by piece, her fear began to loosen its grip. Reflection. Moment every mile put distance between her and the cruelty of the auction block. But every mile also raised new questions. Why had he done it? Why risk the scorn of the crowd, spend so much money for someone he had never met? Was it compassion? Duty? Something deeper? Sochne wali baat ye hai. Do you believe true acts of kindness exist without hidden motives? Or does every rescue come with a price? By the time the third night fell, she realized something extraordinary. The warrior never once called her his. He never claimed ownership. He simply offered protection, food, and freedom, and then left the rest to her. The journey that began in terror was slowly transforming into something else. The first steps toward dignity, safety, and hope. And though she could not yet say the words, deep in her heart, she began to understand. When the Lakota warrior had raised his hand in that crowded hall, he had not just bought her. He had broken the chain. The days turned into weeks, and the memory of the auction block began to fade, though it never disappeared. The woman still carried scars, invisible ones, from that day. But with every mile she walked, with every sunrise over the endless plains, she began to breathe a little more freely. Her child laughed more often now, no longer crying with every shadow. And at the center of this transformation was the Lakota warrior, the man who had raised his hand when no one else would. A new life begins. The warrior guided them toward his own people. When they reached his village, the reaction was mixed. Some looked at the woman with curiosity, others with suspicion. Whispers rippled through the campfires. Why had he brought her here? What did it mean? The warrior, however, did not waver. He introduced her by name, not as property, but as a guest under his protection. He gave her a place to rest, food to eat, and safety no one could question. At first, the woman remained cautious, keeping to herself, always watching, always listening. But soon she realized that here, no one called her slave. No one tried to take her child from her arms. The people treated her with quiet respect, because the warrior's word carried weight. Now pause and think. What does it mean to be restored to dignity after having it ripped away? Can respect heal wounds that cruelty once carved? The warrior's reputation. Within the village, the warrior's story spread quickly. People admired his courage. To step into a crowd of traitors, to defy prejudice, to pay an unthinkable price for the sake of compassion. This was no small act. Some called him foolish for wasting resources. Others whispered that he was brave beyond measure, but none could deny what he had done. Children listened around fires as elders retold the moment. They were auctioning her with her baby in her arms, and he raised his hand. It became more than a story. It became a lesson. The weight of kindness. The woman slowly began to trust. She worked alongside the warrior's people, tending fires, gathering food, and caring for her child. The warrior never demanded anything from her. His kindness remained steady, like the prairie wind, unseen but always present. Sometimes, when the nights were quiet, she would ask him, "Why did you do it? Why raise your hand for me?" And always, his answer was the same. Because no one else did. Simple words, but filled with truth. Think about that for a moment. How often in history do we overlook the chance to act because we wait for someone else to step forward? The legacy grows. Over the years, the woman and her child thrived. The boy grew strong, running across the prairie with laughter instead of tears. He would never remember the day of the auction, but he would carry the mark of the warrior's choice for the rest of his life. For the Lakota people, the story became part of their oral tradition, not just a tale of cruelty, but a reminder of compassion. It was retold not as tragedy, but as proof that even in the darkest times, humanity can prevail. Every generation needs its heroes. Some are warriors of battle, others are warriors of spirit. This man became both. The larger truth. And yet beyond the village, the world remained cruel. Auctions continued in other towns. Families were still torn apart. The cycle of greed and suffering did not vanish overnight. But here's the truth. Even a single act of defiance can ripple through history. One man's decision to see humanity, where others saw property, planted a seed. A seed that would grow into stories, into lessons, into courage for those who heard them. Sochne wali baat ye hai. Can one act truly change the course of history? Or does it simply light a small fire in the darkness, enough to guide the next person forward? Reflection for the audience. What do we remember of the past? Wars, kings, treaties. But the real heart of history often lives in these hidden stories. Moments when compassion stood against cruelty. The Lakota warrior's legacy is not measured in land conquered or battles won. It is measured in a mother's tears of relief, in a child's laughter, in the dignity restored when no one else dared to restore it. This story reminds us that history is not just written in blood. Sometimes it is written in mercy. Closing. So the next time you hear about empires, about rulers and wars, remember this. There was once a woman trembling on an auction block, her baby in her arms. The crowd shouted numbers, eager to claim her life. And then, one Lakota warrior raised his hand. Not to own her, not to enslave her, but to give her freedom. And now I ask you, if you had been there, would you have raised your hand? Comment below with your thoughts. And tell me, which forgotten story should we uncover next? Because the shadows of history are filled with voices waiting to be heard. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe, so we can keep bringing these untold truths into the light.